Greetings and God bless. Welcome to another episode of Pastor Mike, Dynamic Voices for a Diverse Church, powered by The Witness, a Black Christian collective. I'm your host, Tyler Burns. You can follow me on Instagram and X at Burns Clan. Please follow at your own risk. And joining me, as always, is the founder of The Witness. He has a very extensive bio. He is the man, the myth, the legend, the three-time best-selling author, Mr. Blue Check Verified himself. You can follow his writings at jamartisby.substack.com. Dr. Jemar Tisby.
What's going on, folks?
My co-host.
Yeah.
My beloved co-host.
Finally, after 10 plus years. Yes, I
Dr.
made it.
Jamar Tisby.
Co-host status, y'all. This is a big day for me. Should I change my LinkedIn status?
Listen, I think this is probably the 755th most important thing you've accomplished in your career.
Please.
So, yeah, sure. If you want to, it would be an honor for me. Listen, we always love to do this episode probably once or twice a year, but we like to do an AMA, Ask Us Anything. And so we put it out to the people. We got some from our patrons. Shout out to patrons. You can support us at patreon.com/Pastor Mike. You're literally keeping the show going. So just FYI.
Allie told us you don't have to say / You can just say /.
Okay, I'm sorry.
All right, so I'm just saying.
Patreon.com/Pastor Mike. It's ingrained in my subconscious now. So I feel like I have to say it every time. But you can support us there. Thank you to all our patrons who support. And then we have some people who just send in some questions. Then we have some trivia questions that just kind of keep coming up. And people keep asking us, so we want to ask those. But
and as a bonus, y'all, probably the fastest way to get in touch with us is like a DM on social media or a comment on social media.
Yeah, it's probably the easiest way.
Yeah. So shout out to the folks who responded to those question stickers on IG stories.
Yeah, we have about 10 questions probably or so-ish.
Okay.
We won't get through all of these. But
that's a defeatist mindset. Don't put that in the atmosphere.
Well, I'm not trying to get through all of these. I'm gonna tell you what I'm not trying to do. I'm not trying to get through all. Okay, let's do with the first one. It comes from a patron or patrons, Dale and Jennifer. Hi, Dale and Jennifer. Hey. How are you? Hope we can see you. And it says, we were greatly impacted by the movie Origin about Isabel Wilkerson's process of writing the book Caste, The Origin of Our Discontent. Would you consider a Pastor Mike episode discussing this film and your thoughts about Wilkerson's concept that caste, not race, is the deeper issue in our nation? Then they also put, we thoroughly enjoyed your episode sparked by the film American Fiction, another powerful film. Thank you. Pastor Mike opens our eyes to many important perspectives. Shout out, shout out. Have you read the book Caste?
No.
So I have read part of the book Caste. I will say that I'm a huge fan of Dr. Wilkerson's or Isabel Wilkerson's book, The Warmth of Other Suns. One of the better books written since the turn of the century.
Yes.
Incredible narrative, storytelling. She's obviously a gifted writer and phenomenal. I read part of the book Caste, and so the idea is that there's a caste system. It's kind of maybe a refutation of the idea that America is not a caste system. She kind of makes that statement that at the underlying root, caste is the issue, not race. And specifically, she puts different people in the caste system, right? So she says in the upper caste, there are white citizens. Then in the lower caste, there are black citizens. And then in the middle caste, there are Hispanics and Asians that are trying to get up into the upper caste. And so she basically creates this structure and construct, which is not new, that kind of superimposes the caste system onto the system of race.
Right.
It says that the real issue is caste, which I keep wanting to say class because that's what it feels like. What you say, keep wanting to say class, but it's the issue is caste, not race and ethnicity. So you haven't read the book. I will tell you from the part that I read, I deeply respect Isabel Wilkerson's work and her giftedness and mine. I will say that one of the harder parts of the book, I did not so much enjoy this book. And the reason why I would say that is it was one of the harder parts of the book to process is how she separates caste and race pretty early on in the book in a way that doesn't necessarily feel very satisfying. So it doesn't necessarily feel like we got to the end of it. But I think beyond that, the words caste and race throughout the book, the part of the book I read, was also used interchangeably.
Almost
so like on a consistent basis, it's used. And so I'm like, which one is it? So I found myself not really getting around the argument. I think it was one of those things I was like, man, maybe this is like too much for me to like process. But I think there's also been some very interesting refutations or pushbacks, I should say, from Black women sociologists who have talked about this and how that doesn't necessarily work as much in the American context as one might think.
It doesn't map on well to the U.S. racial experience. And so I didn't read the book, but I did have personal contact with a Black woman sociologist who had a very strong critique of the book. She's a former coworker of mine. Y'all just do an internet search, Saida Grundy and Cast, Saida Grundy, Gurndy and Cast. And every question she had is like a dissertation. Let me just read one of the questions.
Yeah, I want to hear one of these.
She was supposed to interview Isabel Wilkerson, and that didn't happen at Isabel Wilkerson's request. I'm not going to go into the details, but I will read. Dr. Grundy did release the questions that she was going to ask because she had sent them to Isabel Wilkerson beforehand. So here's question number 1 from Dr. Grundy to Isabel Wilkerson. Early in the text, you define caste as, quote, a system is an art. You define caste as a, quote, system is an artificial construction, a fixed and embedded ranking of human value that sets the presumed supremacy of one group against the presumed inferiority of other groups on the basis of ancestry and often immutable traits. This is a direct quote. Traits that would be neutral in the abstract but are ascribed life and death meaning in a hierarchy favoring the dominant caste whose forebears designed it. Goes on. And then she said, I was struck by this definition because it's functionally interchangeable with the sociological definition of race. Yeah. And yet, you go to great lengths in the text to distinguish caste from race. On page 70, she had receipts. On page 70, you follow up by explaining, quote, what is the difference between racism and casteism? Because caste and race are interwoven in America, it can be hard to separate the two. This is from Wilkerson. Any action or institution that mocks, harms, assumes, or attaches inferiority or stereotype on the basis of the social construct of race can be considered racism, et cetera, et cetera. The question is this from Dr. Grundy. Why do you think it's so important for your readers to understand the distinction between caste and race? And given this second definition, what in particular do you feel caste allows us to observe and account for analytically, politically, sociology, etc., that structural and systemic, not just interpersonal, racism would not? Yeah. So that's a lot of words.
It's a phenomenal question, though.
Exactly.
It's a phenomenal question.
It's a lot of words to basically say.
That honestly would be my number one question.
Right. So, she's just basically saying, like, the way you define caste is very identical to the way we define systemic racism. Right. So what does defining it or identifying it as caste help illuminate that describing it as systemic racism doesn't?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Now that's one of like 6 or 8. So
I would, that's the question I would love to hear a little bit more on to kind of process. I haven't seen the film Origin, but I heard it's very powerful. Like a number of people have said it's really powerful. So I will have to check that out. I remember before somebody had told me to check out American Fiction, and I did, and I enjoyed it. So like I'll check it out.
I just gotta say, I don't want to say this in a gatekeeping type of way or whatever, but expertise matters. Yeah. Like there are people who study this, and a PhD is a research degree, which means you did a lot of spade work to uncover stuff that most people don't have the time to look into. Not that they're not smart enough or anything like that, but this is what researchers, sociologists, historians, whoever you want to name, this is what they do. And a lot of times we are captivated by really good storytellers who may not have the philosophical or analytical frameworks to be as helpful as they could be.
That's good. That's a good word. And maybe we can talk about this more on an episode and kind of elucidate this, because I think that there's probably more meat on this bone.
Of course.
Oh my goodness. Yes. Yeah. No disrespect whatsoever. I mean, I'm many levels. You're a PhD. I'm many levels below that rung of
No,
all
no, no. I'm
this,
talking
so.
about like Isabel Wilkerson.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
Exactly.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah, like all respect. Like I'm many levels below even the writer, below the scholar to the whatever.
Please.
So I'm just like, yo, I just as a reader and as someone who's eager to learn, eager to read a follow-up book from her, I was like, oh, this isn't necessarily what I was thinking it was gonna be. So
Great question.
That's just me. Great question though. Shout out to Dale and Jennifer. We have another Patreon question that's coming in a little bit, but here's one. How do y'all feel about the Caitlyn Clark, Angel Reese controversy?
You the basketball head.
Okay, so for those who are not familiar, obviously we're talking about the WNBA, which has skyrocketed in attention, marketing, in many ways attendance, as well as the controversy of the two rookies, Angel Reese from LSU and Caitlyn Clark from Iowa. That was a college rivalry that expanded into now a pro rivalry slash competition slash beef, whatever people think it is. And in the end, the concept is obviously Caitlyn Clark is a white woman and Angel Reese is a black woman. So Angel Reese is a kind of a post player, forward in basketball terminology. And Caitlyn Clark is a guard, so there's also like size differences and all kinds of perceptions there. But it's kind of become people choosing kind of two warring factions of the rivalry in sports, and people thinking that Angel Reese and others have been picking on Caitlyn Clark specifically, and people have asked the question, why are you picking on someone like Caitlyn Clark? You should be thanking her because she's bringing more attention to the WNBA and things of that nature. She also struggled early on in the year and now has since come on to be one of the best players in the WNBA, even in her first season. And then also Angel Reese has started off really well, also broke some records, but struggled later on in the season. So people are like, see, Caitlyn's better than Angel, all this. And it's almost become this like very strange, like, socio-political dialogue between a white player and a black player.
It's a proxy
who's
for a lot of
better.
things,
and
yeah.
It's a proxy for so many different things that catch on. I think they're both phenomenal basketball players. I think what was sad but also kind of hilarious to see is when Taylor Swift publicly endorsed Kamala Harris, Caitlyn Clark liked a post with Taylor Swift endorsing Kamala Harris for president. And she received all these hate comments, hate mail, people attacking her. It's like, oh, so this really means more than just basketball now, right? Like she's a proxy for your view of the world, or proxy for your view of sports, or your view of quote unquote wokeness. And now if she doesn't line up exactly, now something's wrong, like something's off and we got to attack her. I think a lot of what's happening with Caitlyn Clark and Angel Reese and then the broader WNBA is two things. Number one, I think they're it's an obvious comparison, but a modern day like Magic Bird for the WNBA in terms of attention, in terms of excitement. I think they're both incredible. I think what's also very intriguing to me is that both of them, like, they're hoopers. Like they're hoopers. Like they're the type that they're gym rats. Like they get out there and they just play. Like this is not like some sort of like game for them. This is like their lives. Like they like ball is life for real for them, And so when you see both of them as hoopers, I'm like, a lot of this stuff is just hoop stuff. This like hoop language, hoop terminology, like hoop. It's what you do, right? Like you push somebody, you talk smack, like you talk crazy, like you do whatever, like you just competing. And I think that was one of the points that Angel made even post or before the rematch game that they had last year in the NCAA season. She was like, there's no beef between me and Caitlyn. Like we respect each other. Like, but when we're out there, we competing, we going hard. Like,
yes. So
I personally think it's sad, but I think it does a disservice to both of them. But I think a lot of what people have perceived as like intimidation or bullying to Caitlyn Clark is just hooping. It's what you do. Like somebody's going to let you walk in there and take their spot.
Caitlyn Clark strikes me as the kind of person who's like, the more heat, the more adversity, the more determined she gets.
Absolutely.
The more dangerous she's going to get on the court.
Yeah.
So there's probably a
she
part of her
thrives
that's
off
like,
that.
come on, bring it on.
Yeah, I think she thrives off that.
Angel Reese the same way.
Yeah, there was this whole controversy about her not making the Olympic team. And for me personally, like, I don't know enough about the WNBA to like, which I think is another thing. People need to stay in their lane. Like, if you haven't really been watching the WNBA, you probably don't have much to comment on. But I think it made sense to me because I was like, man, if I were one of those players who was on like a vet who was definitely going to make the team, I don't want to spend the entire Olympics experience answering questions about one of my rookie teammates. Like, I was like, I get why she's not on there. And I'm not saying like they had the idea of like kicking her off or keeping her off or gatekeeping her. It's more like, I'm sure they were relieved, like, dang, so we don't have to spend the entire Olympic journey.
Somebody else can be the focus.
Yeah, like now we can like focus on winning.
Yeah.
And we can win the goal, which they did, things like that. So
yeah,
that's what I would say.
but I mean, listen, the boundary marking from the people who were ticked off and commented on Caitlyn Clark simply liking a post.
Isn't that wild?
Like, this is it's
It's not like she endorsed her. She
no,
liked the post.
it was literally clicking like on a post, and which could mean a lot of different things, right? But it was just a click. But what I think was happening was, yeah, it's just quote unquote just trolling on social media, but also it can be seen as a kind of power play to determine who's in and who's out,
For sure.
who represents white folk and who doesn't, and where you can even put your likes
Exactly.
on
Isn't that
social
wild?
media, which is it's sad. It's sad that you got to find any kind of way to assert power, dominance, and relevance.
It's sad. Well, here's another question from Patreon. Matthew, what's up? Thank you for
What's up?
supporting. In your plea for the suffering, this is a critical comment, so a critique. In your plea for the suffering Palestinian people, I did not hear you say anything about the role of Hamas and the Arab governments to cause that suffering. Among many other things, Hamas hides its soldiers among civilians and builds military installations under hospitals and schools, which is a war crime that directly puts the Palestinian people in the center of the battle. Would you acknowledge the complexity in who is responsible for the suffering? Thank you for this question. I think one of the things I try to make clear in the conversation, the episode, which I believe is called Genocide in Gaza, one of the things
The terminology there is significant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was intentional, very much so intentional. One of the things I try to make clear is we're not speaking altruism on either side. We've never said that. We've never talked about altruism, especially when it comes to people and governments and organizations. I also made it clear to read the things that I had signed up for as, black clergy. When we talk about a black clergy resolution to our U.S. government, to President Biden. And one of the things that we had talked about is the release of all hostages, like the end of a ceasefire completely. Like, we mean everything. I think it is very intriguing that our goal and our focus was on the suffering Palestinian people, and we want that to stop no matter what. And while we may not have the ability to lobby Hamas, we can lobby the U.S. government to stop sending military weapons over there to actually fund this war. So, like, fund, frankly, a genocide. So can we stop? That was our entire hope. That was our entire thrust. Sure, we would 1,000% acknowledge that evil things have been done. I think if you've been listening to us and you know us, we're not for that. We're also for trying to make sure that we're not complicit in something that is continuing the suffering of countless tens of thousands of people, including children, which matters deeply to us. And, I think Jemar's shirt says it all, justice takes sides. And so we take a side on this, not necessarily saying we take the side of Hamas or the Palestinian government or the government of Israel. We don't take those sides. We take the side of the people who are suffering. And if you are neutral in that, we believe that's siding with those who are perpetrating the injustice. that's, I guess that hopefully you're able to receive and hear our hearts in that. But thank you so much for the question. Thank you for being a patron supporter. That means the world to us. All right, ready for the next one?
Yes.
Okay. Here's a good one. You got to answer this one since you didn't say anything in the last one. If you could take back one thing you've ever said or done publicly, what would it be? This is a question from Bo York, by the way.
These questions. I could have named that. I don't know because
I stand on everything 10 toes down. You ain't going to get me to step back.
Because I don't have a good memory. No, I think the closest I can get is like maybe some articles I've written.
Yeah.
And I'm talking like 10 plus years ago when I used to write for like TGC, Desiring God, those kind of places where I don't know that anything I said was necessarily wrong. I think there was a theological arrogance in some of those articles around Reformed theology that basically said, you know, the white people got it right on this part. We need to, you know, as Christians, kind of adopt this theology so we can get it right, kind of a thing. So I think now I would certainly not say that. And I didn't say that in so many words.
Right,
That was
in
the
that, those
subtext.
exact terms, yeah.
Right. So I think I'm a lot more broad-minded, I believe, at this point. Not that I've arrived by any means, but to understand that there are riches to be found in God's church
That's good.
all over.
That's good.
All over.
Yeah.
And we can still learn some things from European theology, right? But we also have much, much, much more to learn because it hasn't been dominant from other traditions, particularly from the marginalized and oppressed.
Yeah. Man, there's probably a bunch of things
I mean,
take
you preach every week.
back. Bro, it's probably a bunch of things I
20
would
years.
take back. Man, bro, probably a bunch. I do think I would have, if there's one thing I could have done differently or changed or not done or taken back, it's trying to convince people of my worth. Like I spent a lot of time arguing to be on a stage I was already on. So that's one thing, like, yeah. So specifically with Reformed culture and church, like, I think that's one thing. I think I also hurt a lot of people in my own context by like making really broad statements about my own black church context. So yeah, I definitely take that back. It'd be something that hurt somebody or made somebody feel away.
Yeah.
As truth tellers, here's a good one. Mr. Justice Takes Sides. Is being independent the way to go? So the person who says this, they didn't actually say whether it's independence in terms of political, whether it's independence in terms of denominational, affiliational, whatever, they didn't say. So I'm going to leave it up to interpretation. As truth tellers, isn't it better just to be independent away from affiliations and connections and tithe and all that?
The way I took that, because it was unspecified, was institutional affiliation.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I don't have a word for the Lord on this, from the Lord on this. But for me, it has been beneficial to be more independent on institutions than dependent. And that doesn't mean without accountability.
Yeah.
But for what I talk about and the way I talk about it, the institutions I've been in mostly, and I'm talking in white Christian context, have not been friendly to it, have not been accommodating to it. Even if there's goodwill and good intentions, the institution itself is not set up to hear these truths. I work now at a historically black college. It's the first time really in my working life where I feel like I don't have to look over my shoulder for something I say about racial justice.
Yeah.
And that's quite nice.
Yeah.
So if you can find it, go for it. But to be the sort of pebble in the shoe
Yeah, it's tough,
in an
bro.
institution means you
That's
always
tough.
getting stepped on.
That's
so
tough,
I think it's
bro.
tough. I think it's tough. I think it can be for a season, but I think long term, I mean, the only way I know how to survive in that situation is you have places of safety.
Yeah, I'm deeply like as one who is, more of a truth teller, prophetic type, I'm deeply desirous and longing a space to be, but I haven't really found it yet. And hopefully, like, I found spaces that were welcoming to me. I found spaces that were encouraging. Haven't found a space outside of my own local church that's embraced me fully. So that's been tough,
And the other thing I'll say to that is sometimes we have to build our own institutions.
Yeah, exactly. Which
know.
I hate. I hate that word, so I rebuke it. But no, like seriously though, like I sense like, oh, okay, I've just got to create it.
Yeah. New
It's tough not being in the system though. Sometimes,
Very much so.
like, it's tough.
There's a
or it's
reason
tough
why.
being in the system only so much to a point, because there is a reason why, and that. That's hard. Here's one. What's your regular morning routine? You talked about this before. What's your regular morning routine? Like, just give us a little something. Like, you ain't got to give us the whole, like,
Yeah, I
shebang.
mean, it's one of these things where with all of our self-care, it should be not constantly, but it should be frequently revisited and adapted so that, in my personal experience, depending on what season I'm in, I'm going to require some different things. So right now, my routine is wake up around 6, and then immediately exercise. Like, I need physical activity to wake me up, and even more so to develop a sense of momentum. Because I find if I like get up and do whatever, it feels like the process of getting up, waking up, starting the day just expands.
Yeah.
Whereas if I get up and exercise, whether that's a walk outside or lifting or whatever it might be, I'm like, okay, boom, I've already done something healthy, but also feels like productive. Then after that, I journal. So I talked about in my footnote Substack doing morning pages, and it's 3 pages of handwritten stream of thought. And it has helped me process so much. And the value of it is you never let too much stuff build up and go unprocessed.
Yeah.
So daily you have a download of everything you're thinking and feeling, which just sort of clears my head, clears my emotions to be able to look toward whatever's coming. Then I write for professional stuff. So books. I'm working on my next manuscript right now. Substack.
Okay.
Revising.
You just dropped something right
books.
there. You just dropped something.
It was an announcement before, but I haven't made a big deal of it because I haven't finished the manuscript.
Yeah.
So by the time I finish those things, exercising, journaling, writing, everything else is icing.
Yeah.
And I'm
you've
usually done by
the key.
11 or
Yeah.
12. And I've done the key things. So I can be as productive or slow or groggy or whatever after that. I know I've done the most important things.
You've done the important things. Yeah. That's really dope. I love that.
And it changes. So do you have a routine?
Yeah. So I do get up. I try to get outside and get sun within about 10 to 15 minutes of being up. Sometimes that doesn't work, but I try to get outside and have sun. Wait about 90 minutes, which typically in that meantime, I have my meditation, what have you. Then I get coffee, then work out. So I'm typically up around 7. So it's that, coffee, workout, emails for 60 minutes-ish. Sometimes 5 minutes. If I'm looking at the emails, I'm like, I'm going to come back around to that. But I typically have to, because I'm a visionary, I typically have to schedule in tea time, what's called tea time, tenacity time. So if I don't, I won't get little stuff done that I hate, But I'm still struggling to like figure out, is this the best morning routine for me? Does this fit the best? What have you? So it's a struggle for me to eat in the morning. So like, I don't like eating. So it's like, that's one in the morning. So I'm just like, oh, okay, like I've got to think through that.
And coffee fills you up. So
yeah, but so I try to eat a little something before coffee, but I just don't want to, that type of thing. So yeah, I'm still in that morning routine, the download. I think that's really dope. Yeah, that's dope. Okay, 2 more questions and then we'll call it. an episode. How might well, I feel like this is kind of like very interesting. Like this is like what you do, so maybe just get the books. But how might a white person in a fairly racially diverse church help move the white population? Fairly diverse. I would say like, yeah, like I would.
Fairly doing a lot of work.
Yeah, that's like a very interesting question because like I have a fairly diverse church, right? So like, is it predominantly white or majority black? So my church is majority black, which shifts a lot of the dynamic, right?
100%.
And like, so how do you process that? You know, maybe that's a little bit different if it's majority white, right? I think you probably do different things. My encouragement is, you know, obviously if you're following Jemar, following us, then you've probably read a lot of stuff that Jamar's written. I think that would be of tremendous importance for you to kind of think through the arc of racial justice. That would be really important. But I think even beyond that, I think you need to determine like, what's your goal here? Like, where are you trying to move them to?
Exactly.
Like, what's the goal? Like, are you trying to move them to full acceptance of everything that you believe at all justice issues, or are you trying to move them to an acknowledgement of their neighbor? And depending on those things, it probably depends on how much time you're there, how much frustration you have, how much tenacity you have to get it done, but then also the things that you do. Like, I'm more a why person, and the how person can change in many different ways. There's a bunch of different ways to approach it. There's a bunch of different styles of books. There's a bunch of different exercises and theological concepts and sermon series and all. There's a bunch of things, but the question is, what's your goal with all this? And beyond just your goal, does the leadership of that church have a commitment to doing the same thing you desire to see? Because at the end of the day, if you're not in that spot and they don't have that same desire, it's going to be a hard charge up that hill.
Yes.
And oftentimes very unsuccessful.
Leadership is critically important, and I wouldn't be surprised, depending on the context, if some of those white folks left, if leadership is actually like doing what they should be doing around race and justice, because it's not going to fit for everyone. And I don't mean like church shopping fit. I mean, some people are not committed to justice like that.
Yeah, it's just not their thing.
And they're going to self-select out of there.
Yeah.
Maybe that's already happened, which is painful, but maybe it was necessary.
Clarifying. It's super clarifying.
And then from a super practical standpoint, pilgrimages are really powerful.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of people choose to go to the Lynching Memorial and Museum in Montgomery, National Museum of African American History and Culture in D.C., but you don't have to go that far for any of it. There are definitely sites in your own city, whether monuments or markers, statues, museums, or even individuals can kind of be a pilgrimage experience to talk to them. And so helping folks see beyond the church walls
is really helpful.
How this is relevant to them. And then lastly, I'll say, depending on the kind of church and where they are in this dialogue, ethnic-specific groups are not bad if they're purposeful and constructive.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure.
And so even a group comprised purposefully of white people temporarily, not in a old school U.S. segregation style, right?
Whites only.
Whites only. No, don't do that one. But to say, listen, as white people, we have to decolonize a lot of stuff, and sometimes that's best done in a context with other people who are in the same process, and also when we're not burdening Black people or other people of color to be the sage and the instructor and the educator in every instance,
and just draining their every emotional ounce of energy and all that. Yeah.
So I think we shy away from that because it looks a lot like segregation,
right?
But the telos is important. Like, what's the goal? That's what determines the fruitfulness of these specific groups.
That's good. Well, one more question and we're done. If tomorrow you were done with your current work and had to choose something else.
Done with the current work?
What would
dead,
that
right?
be? Nah, bro. Hey.
The sin of racism has gone away. Jesus has returned.
Well, done with your current vocation, okay? Not your calling, your current vocation.
Well, Vocation
would
comes
that-
from the Latin vocare, which means calling, but whatever. I get your point.
Done with your current job. J-O-B.
Last question.
Golly, it is the last question. Goodness gracious. You should have seen how I looked at this camera. You know what I'm saying, okay? Done with your current job. What would you do? So you got to answer first since you give me a hard time.
I got a bunch of them. Journalism would be really interesting to be a journalist. I think acting would be interesting. Yeah. I am a writer.
I've never heard you say that, but that makes sense now hearing you say that.
Yeah. I am a writer, but I'm already going to branch out into different styles and genres of writing, so I'm excited about that.
Anything you want to share? Anything? Any style that you're thinking about? We'll talk off mic.
We'll talk off mic. What about you?
Well, so this is if I were not a pastor. So so I've thought about this because I assume, like, I don't think I'll be pastoring at my church forever. I actually want to have a.
You heard it here, folks. He's retiring the jersey.
Nah, people at my church know I talk about this very openly. That I like to, I say all the time, hey, I'm not going to be a pastor forever. I anticipate, and I've said this before as well, I probably have 5 more years pastoring there. I'd love to just be a church member at my church. I love my church that much that I'd love to just be a church member there, and just support the new person who comes behind that I just raise up. So. Yeah, so I've thought about, I also want to give agency to my family to actually not build their lives around my vocation and my calling, my job. So there's that. So I anticipate I'll have a season of trying to figure out what else I do outside of just ministry stuff. So 3 things that come to mind, not to use 3, but just 3 things that come to mind. Number 1, I would absolutely love to go to culinary school. Or culinary school, as they say.
And shout out to your mac and cheese.
Hey man,
my.
But I love to go. I love to go to culinary school. Would love to. That actually is a dream for me. Number 2, I would love to learn how to DJ.
I feel like you could probably already do that.
Well, I mean, like the craft. Right, like I think from song selection standpoint, like I do that all the time. Make playlists. I love that. If you follow me, you know I've shared some playlists before. But then the third thing, which is also a love, is I love to get into perfumery. Would love to do fragrance stuff. Would love to make my own fragrances, colognes. Why do y'all keep laughing at that?
I love that, but it made me think of Parks and Rec and the character.
I don't watch Parks and Rec, dog. I don't watch Parks and Rec.
Don't worry about it.
I don't watch Community.
Great. You're totally different.
No. But tell me what's up. What do you say? What do you do then? What do you do?
He has all these horrific scents that are named terribly, and people like want to vomit when they smell them. But that's not you. You're
bro,
I bought
some that haven't been. We finna try some later. Y'all might not like them. I'm just saying, but. I bought some that ain't really hit as much as I thought, that smell like a little bit of, cat droppings or whatever.
So those are the ones you brought for us to try out. I got you. Okay.
I have some that everything must go. Bad. But no, I would definitely, I'd love to get into the fragrance game in terms of actually being a part of it, whether a fragrance broker or actually creating my own fragrances. So if you know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that wants to give me a perfuming set or a fragrance set, hey, I'm here. I'm wide open for it. So yeah, that's what I probably, one of those three.
I can see it.
Well, fam, I hope you've enjoyed us kind of breaking the veil down, doing a little AMA, BTS behind the scenes. Ask us anything. Thank you so much for supporting us, especially to our patrons. You can support us at patreon.com/passthemic. Just for even just a little bit per month, just a few dollars per month, you can really, really bless this podcast. Keep us going, because this is the only thing. We survive off your donations. We don't have no big money backing us. We survive. Look, we survive off your donations. We're powered by the witness, but we do survive as a podcast based upon your donations. So if you've been blessed, consider supporting us just even for a little bit per month. Also, of course, if you're watching on YouTube, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you never miss any of these episodes. And as always, we want you to follow us on social and subscribe wherever podcasts are heard. Well, that's it for us. We'll see you soon on the next
Pass the mic.